Clarke, Maria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you
to
for
have you
having
here.
us.
A pleasure. Absolute pleasure. So I think a good place to start would be just let us know a little about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, okay. Do you want me to
Yeah.
start?
Go for it.
Yeah, so my name's Clarke. I'm the commercial director at PGC, not PCG as some people often call us. I was actually questioning that once, saying, "Are you sure you don't work for PCG?" And I was like, "No, I'm definitely
sure.
sure. I'm definitely sure." So I probably cause more confusion now by mentioning it than not. But PGC, so we're actually a US-based company. Probably 80% around that of our whole workforce are based in the US. We've got our headquarters in Austin, Texas, and our operations hub is based in New York. And everybody who works to sort of make the magic happen, the operation, the service, are all based in the US. And that's where you'd get dedicated support as a business manager if you joined and started to work with PGC. The rest of it, our front end, are all based in the UK, which is really sales and marketing, which is fully remote in the UK and in Ireland. Essentially what we are is we're an employer of record. So we're a registered employer in all 50 states in the US and all 10 and 3 provinces and territories in Canada, which means that really we're a turnkey solution for any recruitment business in anywhere in the world, but predominantly most of our business currently is coming from the UK, who want a piece of the American pie. They see the huge addressable market, they see the low saturation rates of recruitment agencies, they see higher fees, they see at-will employment, and they think, I want a piece of that action, but I don't really know how to get there. So the way we've positioned our business is really we'll be your compliance partner, we'll be your trusted partner from the embryotic stage in your mind where you go, I've just got an idea that I've seen something in the US and I want a bit of it, but I don't know how to get there, what to do. I don't know if I need terms of business, new insurances, different people. What state do I go to? I've got loads of questions and no answers. So we really decided to hone in on that audience of people and really support them throughout the journey. So our sales cycle can be 12 months sometimes. We're predominantly dealing with leaders of recruitment businesses, C-suite level type people who really know business inside out, but just want some support to get over to the US. So we talk to them really in that very early stage about the size of the opportunity over there, potential states, and just really a really consultative approach. We actually don't make any money on anything we do up until somebody places a contractor. So the first 11 months potentially of what we're doing, we're just giving free advice. But our whole ethos is about really leaving people with memorable, positive impressions that regardless of whether you choose to go with us or not, you've had a great experience and you'll talk to somebody else and they may want to use us or they may not. But so far it's working. We've got a great business. We've got great people.
Yep.
Everybody's really engaged, motivated. I feel really blessed actually to be working at PGC because it is such a great company.
Great, thank you.
Fab. I mean, you've done an excellent summary. But just to introduce myself, I'm Maria. I head up our business development team. As Clarke mentioned, we work predominantly with staffing and recruitment companies. So about 80% of our client base are UK or European headquartered recruitment and staffing firms looking to expand. I think one thing about the US is it is so big and it's so complex that it's usually quite hard to know where to go to look for your information. You could be a recruitment founder, CEO, you've had huge success in the UK and European markets. The US is naturally on the next step for a lot of business leaders, but there's not normally that kind of one point of contact. Where do I go to know how to enter the US, the routes to market? So part of my role and my team's role is that we'll be kind of that first point of contact to speak to the recruitment founders and leaders to really just paint a big picture and really paint a journey of how best to get into the market. I think that's kind of summarised what we've done in Clarke's part.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point actually, because before I started at PGC, you like to do a little bit of research on the business. I was quite lucky that I knew a few people who already worked there. But I thought, actually, I'll start Googling about the US and the staffing industry. And you get so much conflicting information when you start going on Google. Actually, you're just reading the information who's got the best SEO. So what we try to do really with almost if you ever look at any LinkedIn post, any bit of social media from PGC, really it's just around education. We're not actually selling what we actually do and what we make our money from, but people buy into that credible, trusted partner who we believe we're the best at what we do. But we know there's some things that we don't do and we can't do. So we're happy to refer to our trusted partners purely because they are the specialists in their field and they give a great service. So we do build up those trust points throughout our 12-month cycle.
And we speak with a lot of companies every single week, and if they're not looking to open up new lines of business, they're looking at new regions, and the US is always on that list, or
Yeah.
at least North America. Why is the US such a hot topic? You mentioned a few
Yeah,
things
yeah,
there,
yeah.
less saturated,
Yeah.
better returns, but tell us a bit more, because people will
Yeah.
be listening and thinking, right, well, I'm wanting to get to the US, but what reinforces
Yeah.
people's view?
So there's quite a few things. I think the one thing that springs to my mind immediately is if you think that the whole global staffing market is around 620-ish billion, 212 billion of that entire revenue is coming from the US. So you've got a third of the revenue of all staffing based coming from that US. If you compare that to the UK, you're probably at about 50 something million. So you're 4 times bigger immediately in terms of your addressable market size. Then you go, well, surely there's 4 times as many recruitment agencies. There's actually less. So there's probably 27-ish thousand recruitment agencies in the US, 30-ish thousand in the UK. So you've got a much bigger addressable market, you've got less saturation, and you've got a really important piece of information which is called at-will employment. And what that means is that this is how I view the UK market. So I came from UK payroll background. Generally, a worker, a contractor will make a life decision, and they'll say, "I want to go down permanent employment, and I want all those benefits that come with permanent employment. I want all my employment rights. I want a notice period, everything else that comes with it. I want that. I want to feel secure in my role." The other type of person will say, well, actually, I'm in a different part of my life, or I don't want the security, but I want a higher net take-home pay, which I think I'll get through contracting. I realise I may lose some of my employment benefits, and I probably won't get a notice period in almost all cases. But they're making a distinct, almost a life choice. There was a lot of movement when I had 35 and the reforms happened that people moved from contracting roles into permanent employment or even offshore. But that was largely because they saw the difference there, and there weren't that many benefits in contracting than what there was in permanent employment. In the US, you have something called a W-2 employee, and that's effectively in the UK. It's very similar to what we would call PAYE. So PAYE, you would be a permanent employee, or you would be like maybe an umbrella worker. A lot of recruitment agencies use umbrellas. But because there's at-will employment, which means that an employer can fire the employee at any time without reason and at will, it's a highly transient market. So it means that people are less likely to make a life decision on being a contractor or a permanent employee. So you've now got a huge addressable market, 4 times as big as the UK. You've got less recruitment agencies. You've got a highly transient market, and you've actually got higher rates of pay as well. So all of that coupled up means that as a professional recruiter, because you are seen differently in the US as you are in the UK. Because in the US, if you think that your best skill could leave, your best piece of talent, your best person could leave you tomorrow with no notice at all, your project stops, something doesn't work as well as it does. So you need a good recruiter who understands your values, your what drives you. You need to understand your business, what people you want, all the things that a good recruiter in the UK can do. And they need it at speed. So actually you become a real asset to that business. So all of those coupled up means that as a recruiter, you can now demand higher rates, so higher margins. So one thing we'll say to a UK business leader, staffing business leader, is you just can't take your UK pricing strategy across to the US because you can demand
Much
so
more.
much more, so much more.
So why isn't everyone doing it? Is it what you said there before, Marie? It's a bit of a
Knowledge, competency. I think a lot of people are scared of the US market because it is highly litigious and it is highly complex when it comes to your legal and tax system. It's really like you're navigating 50 different countries rather than just one. So a lot of people are not sure where to start, not sure what they don't know. And really they're just scared of the legal. So we'll always say, make sure you speak to a US attorney and you've got terms of business that are watertight and that protect your UK business, your mothership, what you've built. Make sure you understand, the differences state by state. Even things like screening candidates, speaking to candidates. In some states, you can't ask your salary history. You've got to be advertising and showing pay rates. There's a lot that you'll need to know and build up your knowledge before you just dive right into the market. So really having that runway of knowledge, strategic knowledge and partnerships to really make sure you're landing at the right time is crucial. We actually advise a lot of our clients to do a recruit from afar method. So, it's low cost, it's low risk. The barriers to enter the US market are actually much lower than a lot of founders and CEOs would think. You can operate from your UK business. You don't need to incorporate, you don't need to register an entity. Especially post-COVID, I think it's made the world a lot smaller. And I always say, paint that shop front, like show that you have got intent to the US, get US phone numbers, PO boxes, change your LinkedIn content, your LinkedIn location. And actually you can operate as an alien business. So you're carrying out all of that search from outside of the US and you can tap into the US market from afar. You're going to try and test your talent. You're going to test the market. You're going to build up your market knowledge. It's going to be a low cost and low risk to your business so that if you do see, which we often do see, that your US desk starts outbilling your UK desk that you've built for 10 years, actually, where shall we go in the US? And again, it's like 50 different countries. You can't just think, let's go to the US market. We'll always say, what state are you going to go to? What location in that state are you going to go to? What area, what industry are you going to...
what dictates that? Is that the type of recruitment that they want to run, the people that need to hire their own speciality?
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. But there's, I guess people do it for a multitude of different reasons.
Yeah.
We spoke to a few people yesterday who were going to go over. They chose Miami, and we was like, "Why are you choosing Miami?"
Yeah.
And it was for the lifestyle because this person was taking his family, his wife, and 2 children, and you've got to take that into consideration. If you was just starting up a business with nobody, you might want to choose Austin for the tech scene.
Yeah.
But also the BD, the culture is different state by state. So your BD may suit better to New York than Florida.
Of course.
There's also costs of running a business. We saw pre-pandemic, and actually as a business, PGC were historically in New York, and New York's one of those locations that if you're going to want to win business and work with clients in New York, you really do need to be on the ground in New York because you need to have that face-to-face relationship and build that relationship. But post-pandemic, we saw a load of end clients and talent move from your Silicon Valleys and your New Yorks to those lower cost operating and living states. So, I mean, everyone has been talking about Austin, Texas now for, 12, 18 months as the place to be. We actually saw internally it overtook New York as a state, and it jumped to second place, Texas, sorry.
Is that because of the tech base and the tax?
Tech, it's now got more Fortune 500 companies than New York. There's 0% income tax. So actually you're getting far more from your talent than if you were engaging talent in the likes of New York. So really as a business, you've got to think, do we want to operate from afar forever? And actually you might then be able to target some of those higher cost states. Or do we think in 12, 18 months, we want to get boots on the ground and start operating out of that state, because that will have a lot of impact into where you're looking at incorporation tax, corporation tax, income tax, where you might need licenses. So it's a much bigger picture than just thinking, oh, I like the look of, North Carolina, let's go there. And that's something we can absolutely help with to make sure that you're not targeting from afar and then realize, wow, that's an expensive state to do business. And actually all of our talent are located in other states.
Yeah.
And why are there less agencies in the US than there are in the UK?
I would say that the UK market historically has always been very, very saturated. And because of that, UK recruiters have got such an edge, such a ability with speed, accuracy, even technology in the UK market is so advanced that actually being a sales, person, UK recruiter is a very entrepreneurial role. And actually, you see a lot of these onesie twosies agencies pop up, and a top biller at this agency will say, "Oh, if I'm billing you 300K a year, I'm going to go and set up on my own." In the US, sales has not always been kind of that role you fall into, which maybe, and I say this, I come from a recruitment background myself, that you might fall into in the UK. So it's never been as an attractive, I guess, job, career, long-term goal for US citizens to kind of go into after college, after university. So we're seeing that the UK market is getting bigger and bigger and bigger with recruitment, staffing agencies, founders. And actually, the US market, you've got far more generalist recruiters, not specialists, not niches, or niches, as they say in the US.
Just gonna say.
And they're far bigger houses. So you'll see an end client chuck a load of jobs to a recruiter in the US and just say, fill what you can. Whereas in the UK, we've really moved away from those generalists, and it's getting really, really specialists. And we'll always say, go an inch wide and a mile deep. And just to your point earlier, why go to the US? We see that UK recruiters that have, been raised and really flourished in a saturated market take all of this skill set and knowledge, go into the US market where there's not that competition, and they make such an impact. So we are absolutely seeing, a mass of UK recruitment agencies go into the US, but it is just still so ginormous. The tech market or tech, industry, recruitment industry in the US is literally the same size as the UK industry as a whole. So people always say, have we missed the boat? Are we too late? There genuinely is enough of a piece of the pie.
Well,
for
it's still
everyone.
growing. It's still growing. I mean, next year, 2024, we're looking at moderate growth, which is around 2%,
Yeah.
just 2.5%. But actually, that's 10 billion, which is 20% of the entire UK market. So whilst it is moderate growth, especially compared to the last couple of years, it's still growth and it's still doing well. It's still continuing to grow. Somebody once described to me, putting a UK recruiter into the US is like putting a shark into a goldfish bowl.
Is it?
And sometimes that's how it feels, that you've grew up in they're almost the Spartan warrior camp of hard training, saturated market, and now you're being put in somewhere that actually have much longer SLAs. There isn't as much saturation, bigger addressable market.
Yeah.
I mean, we genuinely have had examples where it will start off with what we call the recruit from afar model, and you'll have an office with a UK consultant and a US consultant, both leaving from Manchester, both working in the same office, and the UK and the US consultants can't work together anymore because he's ringing the bell for $3,000, he's ringing the bell for 30 grand, and they're both making the same calls. So they've now had to separate the teams, put them on different floors.
Yeah. Just to put some numbers to that, our clients, I'll check in with them and see how's it going. A lot might go perm first, and they'll be as in disbelief as I am, and they say, Maria, we've started tapping into the US market 3 months ago, and we've just put a 90K fee on the board. And actually, there's at-will employment. Most clients and candidates will honour a 2-week notice. So you can turn roles around much quicker, as Clarke was saying. They're much higher fees. The US is litigious, but what that does mean is that they will honour contracts and they do pay. So they're good payers. You can get an invoice out for the likes of 90K within 2 weeks of starting your search or placing the candidate. So the deal sizes are so much higher. And again, coming from a UK market where I think getting 10K on the board is a good fee, we've now got clients that say, I don't even touch a role unless it's going to bring in a 20K fee.
Yeah.
So your fees that you're generating, and at a much quicker pace, a lot of our clients actually say, I'm going to start diluting our UK and European business, because actually if we're not going to be a 50, 100 consultant, firm, let's concentrate all these heads on the US market, because we're going to get far more money for the same amount of work. And time that we're putting into recruit.
Yeah.
So if you were considering branching into the US, apart from contacting you guys, what should a business be thinking of? Where would they start?
Yeah. For me, I would start market mapping. So I would look at all my existing clients. If I have, had success in the UK or European market, where are my big hitters that have US operations, US sister companies, are part of groups? But then also, what is going to be my route to market in terms of the industry and roles that I'm going to recruit for? And then I would go and do, really in-depth research. Where are growth hubs coming up? Where is the talent moving? Where are my big end client or avatar end clients located? I would probably make a short list of 1 to 4 states and locations there. I would then probably take a deeper dive, depending on my long-term goals of costs of operating, costs of talent. I mean, even recruitment consultants now, you'll look at UK, you probably get 20K, 27K recruitment grad. New York, you're looking at 55, 60K for a grad with no experience. So really thinking of all of those operational costs.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think just on that point there, you may think, well, I want to go to New York because it's New York. But then when you get there, you realize it's so saturated now for even trying to find a consultant, never mind a candidate. Actually, could you even, if you wanted a boots on the ground model, could you even find the right people to recruit for you? Maybe you could, or is your strategy to pay high wages, big bonuses, and you can attract it? Or are you going to go to a state where there's great universities and grad programs and you're going to bring them out and train them up, but then potentially lose them if somebody else comes along and steals the talent that you've just trained up? But
Yeah.
there's so many considerations to be thinking about.
Even your internal team, can you pinpoint a few consultants that are doing well in the UK, not even from a billing perspective, but really have your D&I embedded into you, believe in what you're doing, your culture, your journey, that are really going to lift that and be able to kind of steer that ship from the front, whether it's a director, a head of, a billing manager, because really they're going to be the ones that are steering your ship in the US. So really getting their buy-in, incubating their team, and then of that short list that you would be happy to set up and go, you need to make sure they're happy to actually live there, work there, and get embedded in, because Maria, who lives in Wimbledon, might be a very different Maria who goes to set up in Miami. So doing trips out there, and actually your Esters will allow your team to do that. You can go out to the US, do candidate events, client events, spend some time in the locations so that you're soaking in all of the culture and lifestyle, not just what Google image, and YouTube is telling you about the location.
Yeah. And not bringing it back to PGC, but part of the journey that we will take people on, because we have people on the ground in the US. This is the type of advice that how is it to live in Michigan? Talk to me about Michigan, and then they'll start conversations around it with their business manager. They'll really bring them into the culture of where they're potentially going to go. We do something called state spotlights. So we'll say, here's 3 top states based on the roles, the average pay rates, but here's also a dark horse one that you may not have thought of, but it's up and coming, but also the way of living is probably more suited to that person who you've incubated, and really just let them make their own decisions. But you've really got to, we talk about a laser focus and being tiny, really, really small thinking, because the US is massive. You've got to do the opposite of what you think. You've got to go really, really small, demonstrate you can do it, start generating revenue, and then grow out from there.
So you've got market mapping, shortlisting your locations, then finding the right people, then the right locations. Anything else that people need to be considering in those early stages?
Yeah, I mean, tied into those would be, the cost of operating state by state, because again, it is like 50 different countries. There's different sales tax in each state, different corporation tax that you'll be paying, different income tax.
So they don't
You
have
recommend
VAT.
people to operate from the UK first to get a foothold and then look to put boots on the ground?
Yeah, but if you're thinking actually long term, we want to get boots on the ground, and if New York and Texas are your 2 locations, if actually you're thinking my first office, and like Clarke says, we always say go laser focused, and then think about your second office. If this state is going to be a much lower operating cost for you, then actually when you recruit from afar, target this state to start with, rather than spreading yourself far too thin, because it's actually going to be much harder for you. As a UK business, you're not going to think, oh, I'm going to do London, Manchester, Birmingham, a bit of Germany, all this from day one. You're going to start from a hub and expand out.
Yeah.
So just getting the bigger picture of operating costs, even if you are doing a recruit from afar, is just going to give you that better runway, so that when you do land and expand in that state, you've got your client book, you've got, talent pools ready to tap into, and you're not doing kind of a cold start.
Yeah. Education as well. You've really got to educate yourself on the types of workers, very similar to the UK, where you've got your PAYE contractors, your gig in economy, your perm, your inside, your outside of IR35 type contractors. You've got very similar situations, but actually in a more litigious market in the US. So you'll have your W2 worker, and you may be thinking, well, the types of roles I'm going to be recruiting for are all W2. So you need to understand, well, what does that entail? But if you're thinking, well, I may be going down the freelancer route and the 1099s, which is effectively a limited company contractor, that's okay. But are you fully aware of the responsibilities and the liabilities, like you are with IR35 and the end hirer doing an assessment, passing down the SDS, the fee pay responsibilities? Actually, in the US, you've got AB5 legislation. So in the US, it starts off on federal, then you go state, and then you go local. So everything that comes out of Biden's office is across all of the country for tax legislation, all of that type of stuff. And then state law can not override it, but it can enhance what federal law has. And then local can enhance that again. And they do. So in terms of IR35 for the UK, you effectively have one set of rules: your whole supervision, direction and control, mutuality obligation, and your control element and right substitution. But in the US, you'll have AB5 legislation, which came out of California. You've got individual ABC testing state by state, which differs state by state. Depending on what role it is, it can go into a Borello test, which started 11 years before IR35. So it's a really complex piece of legislation that you need to get right, because every single person in the chain is liable except for the contractor. So in some instances, it will be the worker who, because unfortunately they don't have the NHS in the US, but they do now have the Affordable Healthcare Scheme and the Obamacare, which, as an employer of record, we make sure that everybody who works 30 hours or plus a week, which is the federal law, gets access to Affordable Healthcare Scheme. But they don't get that, or they're not entitled to it if they are a 1099 worker. So they may not be paying their medical health care. They may get ill, and then they'll say at the end of the assignment, actually, I should never have been a W2, I should never have been a 1099. And then they'll start off an investigation with the Department of Labour or the IRS. So I guess what I'm saying is it's really important that you educate yourself on really where exactly you're wanting to go with this business. Because right now, if you're building a business purely on 1099s, you'll probably generate some revenue quicker, but you're going to end up with more problems in the back end. And actually, because what we find is if somebody's moving to the US, they've normally got an exit strategy in their mind, whether it's a 3 or 5, 7 year plan. They're thinking, I'm going to sell this business X amount, and that's my plan. When somebody goes to value that business and you've got a base of contractors and the majority of them are 1099 workers, you're investigating each worker because of the litigious issues that could come with each of the workers. If you've got a base of W2s, then it's a much safer place to be. But really, it's about accurately assessing. There are many great tools out there, and just making sure that you're putting people in the right places for the right jobs.
So if they're the considerations for the company, what about the individuals? So say you're working for a company, they're branching out into the US, you've been approached, would you like to go over and work the US market? What should those guys be considering? Obviously there's a location, like you said,
Yeah.
going living in Miami with the family, they want I'm assuming the sun. But what else should the individual be thinking and considering before they actually make the make the move.
Naturally, it will depend, where you're at in your life. If
Yeah.
you're married and you've got children, you're thinking about education, schools, networks of friendship groups for your wife. What's she going to be doing when you're at work building this business? If you're in your 20s, 30s, are there networks of people in, the same ages as you to socialize? And I think for that, one of my main things and main pieces of advice was get those consultants out there. Make sure that, you're back to go on trips. When I was building, from a UK, a US desk, I always thought I'd want to live in New York. I thought New York's where I want to be, the hustle, the bustle. But actually, as soon as I started visiting the likes of Austin, the likes of Dallas, I just think, actually, long term, this is far more sustainable as a lifestyle than to be in New York, which you're going to pay, high prices of rent, socializing, eating out. Even kitchens, in apartments in New York don't really exist because everyone gets takeouts. And that's not me. I love cooking. Things like that. To make sure as a consultant, you're given the opportunity to go out to these places and really embed yourself. Even if you decide at weekends, I'm just going to go and look at some flats. I'm going to go and see what it actually looks like in the suburbs or in the locations that people live. Absolutely, Regent Street's great, Oxford Street's great, but would I enjoy living in Clapham or, those spaces outside of the central hub? I think are just really important because you as a consultant really need to understand you are moving your life. It's not just, I'm going to be billing more, I'm going to be earning more, I'm going to have a commission paycheck. Can you see yourself living there for, I'd say, a minimum of 3 to 5 years on, an E2 visa you'd get anyway. So fully integrating yourself and, ask your directors, your founders, your CEOs, can I go out there on a quarterly trip? And whether that's you set me a target that I need to bill X amount and you'll get me on the plane and I can go and do BD and candidate events. Don't underestimate actually what it means to be picking up your life and moving out to the US. So I would just say really embed yourself in a lifestyle and not just the lifestyle, which is the central location of where you're looking.
And where have people struggled with that? I'm assuming you've heard of, people moved out, hasn't worked, maybe they haven't considered the location, but what should people consider and I guess expecting, which they don't necessarily expect on a short visit looking at apartments?
I think loneliness, and I think where we've seen a lot of founders and CEOs get over that is that they'll send a minimum of 2 or 3 consultants at a time. It won't just be we're sending this one consultant and you're going out alone to build it. So it would be, at least 2, if not 3. We had one client who landed in Miami beginning of this year. He had 8 consultants from the UK go out on a visa. So really making sure you've got that sense of community and you're not just, here's your visa, go and build the US business for us. So really having a team that you've embedded and know the market. And again, I think just doing those trips, go and see what, football communities are out there, or go and see what gyms, I'm not being sexist, but, what you like doing in London or wherever you're based in Manchester, what would that be like going to the US? But I would definitely say now, if you've got it available, send more than just one consultant out, because that's also going to really help embed your DNA, your culture, everything that you're taking out.
Sounds
to
so
the
basic,
US.
but it makes so much sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how are the US viewing the UK guys who are coming out essentially into their turf and competing against them?
Yeah, I honestly, really positively. And we'll have a lot of clients do I admit that I'm sat in Manchester doing this? Absolutely. Don't be afraid to share your successes to date, share that you are a specialist in this market. A lot of people will say, do I hide that I'm new to the market? And actually, a lot of consultants are very open and honest, and they'll say, I've got this track record in the UK, this track record in Europe. I'm now building, my market in the US. Would you spare me 5-10 minutes so I can understand what you're building, what your pain points are, what you're looking for? One piece of advice I would give is that it is worth its weight in gold as a consultant to go candidate first, because you're going to really, really build your knowledge of what makes up a good package, what salaries are people on, what years of experience, equates to these packages. You've just quickly touched on it, but the likes of healthcare in the US is completely privatized. So having an affordable healthcare plan is key. So just so you know what makes up a good package. So as soon as you pick up the phone to a client, you are asking the right questions. You're not just asking salary, PTO, paid time off, holiday days. You're understanding how much is the candidate going to get towards their healthcare plan? What's the 401k pension contribution? So I think going candidate first has really, really benefited as well with that knowledge piece, so that when you're going to market and speaking to clients, you've actually got that knowledge rather than just picking up the phone day one trying to BD.
But so you've only got really the Obamacare that is mandatory. All the other benefits that we would take for granted, pension, for example, isn't. But we know that 74% of all decisions from candidates are made on the benefits package offered by the employer.
Right.
So it's really about, exactly as Maria's just said, it's how do we make a customer-centric offering, business, solution, values-driven business that will really work from this to there, rather than going in there working down.
And do you find that with, I guess, UK businesses where the benefits are normal as part of your package, but not necessarily so in the US? Have you found that companies are going over and almost educating them about the 74% who are basing their decisions on the benefits? You should be thinking about it yourselves.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of clients as well do, market reports, surveys, and then feed that back in as a tool for BD to say, in your market, your candidate pools, this is what we're seeing, these are the levels we're seeing, this is why people are moving. And because, again, it is so transient, actually partnership-led relationships are even more so than what we see in the UK. So if you can pick up the value and say, Neil, just so you know, a load of talent is moving from this company to this company, and this is what the offers are, and this is what, the reasons and drivers behind that. If you are really that value partner that is giving the insight and the knowledge, we're seeing that you are, sticking way more, because if in 2 weeks' time their head of whatever leaves, they know that you know the market inside out, you know what's happening with candidates, where they're going, what's getting them across the line.
Yeah.
Then that relationship's far more, sticky in that way.
And we recognise that as well. It's we genuinely are a values-driven business. Like we really, really are. And there's a lot of businesses that will say that, but we are, and we demonstrate it in many, many ways. But one way is, so our CEO will negotiate his medical package for him and his family. So he's an Australian, but he lives in Austin, Texas. So he's in the same position as many Australians who has to go and source their own medical. So he sourced the best package out there that he thought was for him and his family, which was Blue Cross Blue Shield, and that is the exact same package that flows through to every single one of our contractors who are on our books. It's not that we will have one for him, one for the employees, and one for the contractors. It's the same for everybody, and we adopt that mentality and that approach with everything that we do.
And I guess, there's a lot of businesses in the UK branching out to the US. They're close to the UK economy. They can see what's happening. They're hearing the news. With the US side, do you guys get into advising people about what is happening in the economy and the considerations around legislation, inflation, and all of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got an internal, market research, an internal attorney that will just be pumping out data. But one of the kind of areas that our business managers in the US will cover, so all of our clients will have a dedicated business manager. They'll be educating those teams. So whether you want to do monthly training, 6-week training, fortnightly training, whatever you want around compliance, legals, insights, new laws. This has just come out in New York that you need to do, your salary transparency. We will really be your partner. I think you mentioned it at the beginning, your compliance partner, to make sure that you feel safe in the US market. We know it's a litigious market. And that's why we really do value ourselves as a partner of yours, because we know, the bigger, more successful we make you as a business, the better it is for everyone. So that's absolutely something we can help with. And it is ever changing. So I think it's really crucial that you do have a partnership like that.
You have to. If somebody was to say they know every piece of legislation across the whole of the US, they're not telling you the truth, because it is so enormous There is no possible way that somebody can know it all. I mean, we are the compliance partner. We do absolutely everything that we can. We even do mandatory, like when we're onboarding, mandatory sexual harassment training with all of the employees that come on. But we have our own tech as well, which is called Precision. So in our business, effectively, all roads lead to Precision, which is basically a computer, a piece of tech that will effectively apply all of these state-by-state pieces of legislation. I'll know some of them. I definitely don't know all of them. I'll ask people who live in those states, and they'll be experts on New York because they've lived in New York. But if you ask them about another state, they know little bits. And that's why we have business managers based all over the US. But all of this information is fed into our precision technology, which you put in the timesheet, and it applies state by state. So, for example, in the UK, overtime is dictated by the employer in most instances, but in the US it's dictated on a state by state level. So we talked before about why there's some people potentially make a mistake about the state that they go into. We talked a lot about loneliness, but another reason can be they didn't realise that the legislation in this or the tax in this state was going to be so different to this one that it actually put shackles on them from recruiting. We call California a bit of a diva state, which is great sometimes for the worker, but not so great for the employer or the recruiter. Because of the way that they operate. And one example is overtime. Most states will dictate a certain amount of overtime after 40 hours, where in California it's over 8 hours. But if you didn't know that and you didn't apply it after that 8th hour, actually potentially you're getting a lawsuit on your hand where Precision Software applies all of this state by state legislation for you.
So you're educating, you're giving them the education without them having to do it themselves.
That's almost what we're saying to people is, look, we know you want a piece of this action in the US. We'll educate you with every single bit of education that we've got. We're happy to share everything that we've got. There's no complete transparency. We'll even give you a business manager in the US. But actually, there's so much information, it can probably deter you from what you're actually really, really good at, which is recruiting, making money, placing talent in the right places. Let Precision do that. We'll be a turnkey solution for you. You find your worker, we'll white label all of our software so it looks like your software. You put the worker through it and you forget about the worker until you're putting them in a new role or you want to keep up relationships with them. But you're never speaking to them because something's gone wrong. You're speaking to them because you either put them in a new role or you want to build more rapport.
And I'm sure you see businesses in different cycles of launching into the US. What are the most common things that people either haven't considered or they've actually got wrong and they haven't to unpick it?
Yeah, I would say terms of business, a lot of
Exactly what I was thinking.
a lot of our clients will just be using their UK terms of business, which, if you want to do, but we would absolutely advise you get US terms of business to ensure that they are watertight and effectively reflect US law. Like, you are building a US business, you're going to be operating with US clients. You need your terms of business to be reflective of US laws. Again, the US is so litigious that contracts are key. Like, really, if you're not putting numbers on the board, you'll be focusing on how many contracts are we getting signed, because that is going to overarch whether you're getting paid or not, whether you're getting protected. So terms of business, absolutely kind of get right and don't trip up on not having those in place or thinking that your UK terms of business will protect you. Because if anyone wants to take anyone to court, they won't.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just on that point, like, the people that we speak to are fantastic business people. They're leaders of, in almost every case, very successful businesses in the UK. We can only give them the advice that we've got from our experience. But exactly to Maria's point, what can sometimes happen is that, depending on an appetite for risk, they may use their UK terms of business. Something may happen in the US, but they've only billed one or two people. They've only got one or two candidates over in the US, but all of a sudden they put at risk the whole UK business because those terms didn't protect or separate either business. So you've now got oh, actually, I just want to see what's out there, do a recruit from afar model, see if I can generate some revenue, see if I can make it work, or something's gone wrong. Now I've put all this at risk. So our advice would always be to
Protection up front.
protect your business. Do you know what you may have to pay a little bit of money up front for them. You may need to not go in as gung-ho as what you would potentially like to. But actually, if you want to grow a long-term sustainable business and not put things at risk, that's our approach to business, and that's the advice we'll give you. However, you're the business leader of a very successful business. That's ultimately your choice to do whatever it is you want to do.
Okay. So there's the protection around the US terms of business. What else? Where else have people made mistakes?
Yeah, I would say obviously knowledge. We've spoken about
Yeah.
making sure you're going in well informed, so you're not speaking with clients on day one and not asking the appropriate questions or not understanding the appropriate questions. Off the back of knowledge, specifically in the contract market, I would say those worker types, because misclassification in the US is huge, and
Yeah.
they are not shy when it comes to tax or financial penalties. So we've seen companies get stung with millions of pounds of financial penalties. So really understanding that you're not just doing, placing a contractor here and there, thinking, oh, I've spoken to this guy on LinkedIn and he says he's happy with the role, and putting two and two together, thinking it will be okay. Tax, I would just say speak with a cross-border accountant who fully understands how to, most tax efficiently operate your business. As you are recruiting from afar, if you've not incorporated, not registered, you are classified as that alien business. So you do have some sales tax relief, but essentially you've got certain states where recruitment and staffing services will imply sales tax. And as a rule of thumb, we'll say to clients, track each state your revenue is being generated. So on the perm side, where you're invoicing your end client, on the contract side, where that contractor is being based. As a rule of thumb, and it will change state by state, as soon as you start generating more than $100,000 of revenue, the IRS might say, hey, who's this? What are you doing? And how are we going to get
Per
some money?
state.
Yeah, per state. So just really having either a cross-border accountant that has those cross-border capabilities, or just getting some advice up front so that you are accounting for that sales tax, because the likes of VAT obviously doesn't exist in the US. So you're going to need to account for that sales tax, whether you're embedding it within invoices or adding it onto invoices. I would say definitely just understanding the tax side.
And I wouldn't really call this a mistake, but just more of a journey that some businesses will go on. But it's about that UK-US pricing strategy. Sometimes they won't really. They almost can't believe the value that they can add over there. It is almost a little bit like, are you sure we can get 35% for this role? But now we have some businesses where if the consultant wants to sign off anything less than 30%, it needs director approval. So they'll go through whole cycles of, well, we're just going to go in and win business at the cheapest possible margin. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, I can creep this up. So I would definitely say, forget your UK pricing strategy. Go in with a whole new US pricing strategy.
From the surveys that were carried out last year across perm and contract, the average margin sat at 24.7%, so 25%. We'll always advise clients go in no less than 30. And as I say, we see clients walking away if it's 20% or less. Another thing I see more and more is actually clients being asked, can we retain you? So where UK companies might be 100% contingent, and they might want to enter the US market with a contingent model, we're actually seeing the clients wanting that upfront agreement and commitment to them. So we're seeing
Is that right?
a lot of our clients actually be retained only, or 80% retained, which is obviously amazing when it comes to your fees, your forecasting. So we've seen retained increase more and more in the US as well versus what we see in the UK.
Okay. And is there you said a lot of start with perm. Why is that?
I think a lot will start with perm because of your knowledge building. It's a bit more transient in the fact that you're taking that responsibility away from me when it comes to engaging that candidate. PGC, we try and we do break those barriers down to entry. In the US as well, some of your contractors, each state will dictate when they're legally required to be paid. So it's not on a paid when paid basis. They're getting paid every 2 weeks, so either bi-weekly or semi-monthly. A lot will start perm, but because you've got your at-will notice periods and it's a transient market, we'll see that clients come back to us within 6 weeks and say, we're being asked about contract capabilities. Can we do contract? How do we do contract? So you can go perm first, and a lot will, to get big numbers on the board, get, revenue in the bank. But we know, 9 times out of 10, you'll be asked about contract, or you might have a contract to hire, so a temp to perm placement to facilitate.
Yeah, that cash flow element as well, that they don't need the cash flow if they've got perm. They're just taking the margin. But naturally, they are 1 in 5 contractors are contractors and on flexible assignments.
1 in 5 employees.
1 in 5 employees, sorry, and that's meant to go up to, is it about 50-something% by 2027?
Yeah, so
Statistica.
53% of the whole US labour workforce will be contract, temporary, freelance in some respect by 2027.
Yeah. Just to support those businesses now, because we know that they will go in perm because of the reasons we just mentioned, or it may be that is their skill set when they've got a view in the next 6-12 months when they've generated some revenue to go into that contract space. We're actually just launching a 30-day funding, advanced payment funding for some of the businesses that we work with to support them to grow, really.
Okay.
And even average pay rates, actually, like in the US, our contractors average pay rate $67 last year. So if you're thinking you're working on $67, you actually put the employment costs on after the pay rate to the candidate. And then you're putting that 25, 30, 35% margin on top of that. So you could literally place a contractor a month on a 12-month contract, and you are getting big numbers on the board in terms of that recurring revenue.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference as well with contracts in the UK and the US in terms of the whole pay transparency piece. So we know in the UK that Matthew Taylor did the Taylor report, and off the back of it, we got a key information document. So UK recruitment agencies should be giving a key information document to every worker who registers at their business. And really that's about demonstrating that pay transparency, because if you think of a relationship between a UK recruitment agency and an umbrella company, it's really about education, because when the agency gives that money to the umbrella company, they're giving them the gross invoice value. At that moment in time, that money is actually the umbrella company's money. So they'll take off it the employment costs, the their margin, apprenticeship levy if appropriate, and then you're left with the contractor's net pay. However, whilst all that is completely clear in my mind, for somebody who's never seen an umbrella payslip before, the first question they ask is, why am I paying 2 lots of national insurance, employers and employees? Where in the US, it's the complete opposite. So the pay, it's almost like a PEO model. The pay that they're giving for the work is actually the pay that they will receive. All the other costs, the employment costs, are put on top of that. The recruiter's margin is put on top of that. So it makes it a much more transparent, clear, open market.
Okay. So if a company is doing all of the due diligence like you recommend, they're reviewing the market, they're getting the right people out there, they're choosing the right location, they're choosing the right type of recruitment to run, it almost like are there any pitfalls with launching into the US that people need to be aware of?
I would just say be persistent with your BD. A lot of
Right.
clients will say, what's the secret sauce to winning business? Why aren't I winning more business quicker? And Americans are amazing. They're yes people. They will say yes to getting on the phone, yes to a meeting. They'll reply to things, but then they're also quite good at going cold when it comes to signing terms of business. So, historically in a UK market, if I've had a 40-minute conversation with you on the phone, or we've been on a Zoom call, I'll pretty much think I've got that in the bag. I can start working on that role. I would say, you need to be a lot more persistent with following up those conversations and getting those terms agreed. But when it comes to BD, we see a lot of really targeted in-mails, phone calls. Turn those phone calls into your Zoom meetings, your VC meetings, and really, be persistent with those. Like, don't just think, oh, he's briefed me on a role, I'll start shortlisting and send him, details across. So I would say don't underestimate what it is to build BD, and that's not to say it's impossible. It's just really understanding you are entering a new market, you are a new name in the market. It's not going to be an overnight success. That being said, we've had clients that have picked up a new role with signed terms in 14 days, placed a candidate in 21, but most clients will forecast about 3 months to place their first candidate.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of anecdotal feedback I see is that it'll almost be a month of nothing and then a great month and a month of nothing and a
Right.
great month. So I think it's just about that consistency.
Yeah, and being consistent.
Yeah. And what has worked really well from afar is doing those events. Do candidate driven events, do small round tables, private dining
Yeah.
clubs with CEOs, leaders of the industry, like really drive that thought leadership and value
Yeah.
to embed your relationships rather than just hitting the phones or emails.
It always seems to me Miami, but I do often hear stories of exactly as Maria's just said, whether it be candidates or leaders of business, they'll do rooftop drinks and canapes in Miami, and then all of a sudden they picked up 4 new clients. And so I think it is really about that, getting that BD strategy spot on, being that thought leader, offering something a little bit different, and being persistent, consistent.
Yeah, because the BD strategy for a well-established company in the UK compared to the BD strategy for what is essentially a startup in the US are 2 different things.
Yeah.
So I guess going back to that mindset of what made us successful in the first place.
Yeah.
But if the agency's been out there for a number of years, the BD of or the startup approach for the UK years ago doesn't necessarily mean it's going to start work for the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
Oh. And the world's changed. You've changed probably without even realizing it. You may still think you was hungry, but actually you didn't. You forgot how hungry you actually was 4 years ago when
Yeah,
you started
yeah.
your business. And really, it is about how do I get back into that hunter gatherer mentality that
Yeah.
I've come. Yes, I've got a successful UK business. How do I get this in the US? I've almost got to believe that I'm starting with nothing and I've got to go for it. But we do often find there's a lot of success with people calling their UK businesses who have US parts of that business, and do you have any roles? And that can often be a
getting a
really
foothold
good way
there.
in
Yeah.
for a lot of.
Referrals are also huge in the US. So candidate referrals, client referrals. A lot of clients will say, half of, if not more, of our business comes from referrals. And I think that ties in really nice to go candidate first and build out referrals, whether it's candidates or clients that way. So really have a bit of a strategy rather than just, we've got a list of clients here, let's cold call.
I guess that's
So-
why that market research is so important,
Yeah.
because they might have business ready to tap into without
Yeah.
necessarily knowing about it.
Yeah, and it's understanding as well, because especially through COVID, you've got fantastic end clients in a city that haven't moved, but because of COVID, nobody's now working in New York because they were living in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So you've now got the end client in New York, but they've moved to Florida for the sunshine. So it's really understanding that actually, do my end clients need people in the office all the time? Because I can pick up an end client, but I can't get any candidates who'll drive and live in New York because of the taxes, or they all want flexible working, for example. So it really is just piecing the whole puzzle together.
There's a lot of moving parts, but it sounds like the opportunity is massive.
Yeah, I think if you take your time, you map it out correctly, you're speaking with the right people, and that again comes to your legals, your accountants, your compliance. It's huge. And for me, I always think it is an absolute no-brainer. If you're a top biller in the UK and you're thinking of starting a recruitment company, I would honestly say just do the US market.
Okay.
You're going to get bigger fees quicker. You're going to get paid and you're going to be able to tap in from afar. So I honestly just think it pays dividends to get it right. But the opportunity and the fees that you'll earn are just jaw dropping still.
If you was going to get into recruitment today,
Go west.
yeah, just like the song, you would definitely. Why would you open a business in the UK recruitment market today if you was just going to start off?
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would be doing it in the US. Don't get me wrong, the UK is a fantastic country to live in, and I wouldn't change where I'm living. I love everything about the UK. But for me, it's just so much more logical to work in that market. And if you're already doing that UK, adapt what you're doing and move to the
Yeah.
US. But we don't actually pitch for business, and it sounds really strange, but all of our
Business
leads come
comes to you.
inbound. So we get probably 30 discovery calls-ish. We call them discovery calls, where a C-suite person will get in touch with us saying, I've seen some of your stuff about your stats in Alabama or wherever it may be. Can you spend me 30, 45 minutes to talk about the opportunity out there? And that's how almost every single one of our conversations, journeys, partnerships start off, which is an incredible place to be.
As a recruitment owner, getting into the US, what's the top 3 things people should be considering and why?
So I would consider.
Apart from contacting you guys and getting all the answers.
Well, that was
Yeah.
the top 3.
It's like, go on LinkedIn, find my profile, message me. No, I would say market map.
Yeah.
Like, see what opportunity you've got for yourself in the US market. You know where that opportunity is, where you're going to look. Operationally, as a business, what you need to get set up, your terms of business, your tax, your legals, if you're going to get visas, get those wheels in motion so you're starting to capture any of that revenue that you're going to put into the US market, and then start building your knowledge. So speaking to experts, make sure you've got consultants that you're going to want to target the US, make sure they're building their knowledge so that when you are going to start picking up those phones and start building that presence, you've got all of those things. You've got that foundation sorted. You know where you're going, you know how you're going there, and you know what knowledge you're taking to the market so that you're entering as experts.
Okay. So the terms and conditions, the market, and then the knowledge of the market.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you very
Brilliant.
much. I've enjoyed that
Thanks,
conversation.
Sophie. Time.
Thank you so
Yes.
much
Thanks
for
for inviting
having
us.
us.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.